Good morning, Britain. On the attack, explosive allegations from Dominic Cummings aimed directly at the Prime Minister. Today, Boris's former right-hand man is expected to accuse him of being responsible for thousands of deaths by delaying lockdowns and fighting back against COVID restrictions.
Well, it's being billed as a 4-hour blockbuster here in Westminster this morning as Dominic Cummings lays out his side of the COVID story. But MPs are going to want some hard and fast facts and not just anecdotal evidence of backroom banter here in Downing Street.
Nigel Farage lashes out. He got Brexit done, but now the former UKIP leader claims the cancel culture mob in the United States is trying to silence him. But he does have the ear of President Trump. Former president, that is. So does he think he'll run again? He joins us live.
Is this an iconic image to be celebrated or highly offensive and should be taken down? The giant Marilyn Monroe statue accused of being, well, a statue to misogyny. Protesters claim it portrays her as a sexual object, promotes upskirting and should be binned. That debate after 8.
Celebrating one of the greatest football players of all time, the late George Best, as he's never been seen before. A new documentary offering a rare glimpse into the life of a legend, as told by his son. Callum Best will be joining us here in the studio.
Wednesday, 26th of May, 2021. Live from Television Centre in London, this is Good Morning Britain with Susanna Reid and Bill Turnbull.
Good morning, it's just gone 6:30. Welcome to the programme.
Also this morning, we have a very special treat for you, Bill Turnbull.
Oh, yes, we do.
Yes, we've got some Tibetan singing bowls.
What's so funny about Tibetan singing bowls,
Nothing.
Ian Dale?
Nothing.
It'll bring calm. It'll bring much-needed calm to you and Kevin.
Yeah.
You'll see good vibrations. I've been called a lot of things, by the way,
Right.
in my time
Yeah.
on air, but saucepot,
Is a
never
new one.
before.
Oh, I think it's well deserved, though, isn't it?
Oh,
After
come
this
on.
week.
You can't say
Blimey.
anything on this programme and it gets misinterpreted.
Yesterday, we were all juiced up. You were
The music.
you were
was
talking
juiced
about
up.
good vibrations.
You said that.
You said the first day you were here, you were suggesting getting down to it on the floor. That was yoga, by the way.
Yes, exactly.
But when it
you
comes
say
to
something
the-
innocent and it just gets twisted.
I
and
know.
In the age of
The Mail
digital
Online.
media,
Yeah.
it's gone. There you
Give them an inch and they take a mile.
go. Or a tail even. Right.
Yes, we have a special appearance this morning by broadcaster Ian Dale from LBC. Lovely to see
Well
you.
remembered.
Well, I listen to you every
I know
evening.
you
I couldn't forget. I wonder whether you have got... Yeah, and Dr Hilary, of course, is here as well, as ever. I wonder whether you two have got your popcorn ready for this afternoon, because this Dominic Cummings...
morning.
Oh, it's this morning.
9:30.
Goodness, we better get that popcorn in the microwave
9:30.
sooner than I thought. Yes, OK, so 4 hours. It's going to stretch on into the afternoon.
These occasions, I think Kevin will probably agree with this, often are let down. So there's lots of hype, lots of build-up, and in the end you think, oh, was that it? I don't think this is going to be a letdown.
Not when we've got a headline like "Get Witty to inject you with COVID live on TV to show it's safe."
Yeah, and the question is, who do you believe more, Boris Johnson or Dominic Cummings? And most people find that quite a difficult question to answer. I think Dominic Cummings' problem is people remember Barnard Castle, they don't forgive him for that. There was a poll out over the weekend that showed that 78% of people wouldn't believe Dominic Cummings. There was 52% or something wouldn't believe Boris Johnson. So he is going to have explosive allegations. Will they stick? Well, I don't know.
Well, there are a fair number of allegations. Let's just look at two of them, Kevin. Cummings will allege that Boris Johnson said COVID is only killing 80-year-olds. He talked about COVID as being kung flu, offered to be injected with it live on TV to show it's nothing to be scared of.
Yeah, I mean, look, these are very serious allegations, and Dominic Cummings has to put up or shut up now, and it will be a credibility battle between the two. In some ways, both deserve to lose. What did Cummings do when he was there at the time? But Boris Johnson, it kind of shows a rather flippant approach, an incompetent approach, didn't take it seriously early on. We know he missed 5 Cobra meetings, whether he was writing his book on Shakespeare or whether he's just preparing his divorce and next marriage is open to dispute. But Cummings himself is an unsympathetic character. and it's what evidence he has in terms of documents and whether other people will support him. That's what it will come down to. But there's a big vaccine bubble now that's buoying Boris Johnson. You see it in the opinion polls. People are very grateful they're getting their jabs. Will that be burst if he's been held responsible for so many deaths, thousands of deaths, arguably tens of thousands of deaths?
Ian, Dominic Cummings might be an unsympathetic character, and we might all have had a go at him about the Barnard Castle trip, even leaving London, frankly, to go to Durham in the first place. But he was very, very close to the Prime Minister. And there is a sort of irony that, firstly, that he's arguing about, we didn't go into lockdown soon enough, and yet he appeared to break the lockdown rules. But also, what is his motivation? Because he was right there at the heart of things. So if things were going wrong, we know how much influence he had. Surely he's pointing to his own failure.
Well, if you read his Twitter feed over the weekend, 53 tweets, one after the other, machine gun Twitter, really. You think, well, were you actually there? You aren't a commentator. You were in the centre of it. You were known as the Deputy Prime Minister. You were the most influential person in the government. And yet, apparently, all your advice was ignored by the Prime Minister. Now, on the other hand, there is one thing that we do know. At the meeting of SAGE that he attended, remember there was a lot of controversy over him attending a meeting of SAGE, on the 17th of March, he was questioning the scientists, well, why aren't we going into lockdown now? So there is a little bit of consistency over his argument. He was pushing for an early lockdown. Now, the Prime Minister, if you're told that you've got to basically shut down the economy, I think any Prime Minister is going to rail against that. And it's quite clear in retrospect, Boris Johnson railed against that for too long. Quite happy to accept that. So, I mean, the key thing today is, are these MPs capable of questioning Dominic Cummings in the way that they need to?
Who are they?
Dominic Cummings does not like Greg Clark, who's the chairman of the Select Committee on Science. He's not very keen on Jeremy Hunt either. In fact, Dominic Cummings hates politicians, and you wonder why has he done the job for so long surrounding himself with politicians. So there's going to be a few fireworks.
But the vulnerable part for Johnson isn't the first lockdown, it's the second lockdown in the autumn, when it's quite clear he did delay and he did dither, and most deaths have been since then. So, yeah, the first one, doing that initial moment, you could see other countries were struggling.
There is also possibly a rabbit in the hat to appear, because Dominic Cummings says, I've got the only copy of a crucial historical document from COVID decision-making. Hang on a second, you think, well, it could be very interesting, but on the other hand, if this is from very important decision-making, surely other people have copies of it as well.
I would have thought so. The Cabinet Office have been, under the direction of the Chief Civil Servant, the Cabinet Secretary, have been looking what documents he might have. He might have taken with him. You're not supposed to do it, but everybody does, apparently. So how explosive is it? Now, he's clearly built himself up, Dominic Cummings, with all these tweets, all these threats. In fact, this document, at one point, he threatened to auction it off. So he's got to deliver in that way, and he's raised the bar very high for himself. But there will be other copies of these documents, of course, unless they were handwritten and he wrote it himself. Other people will have them if they are notes and minutes.
The nightmare for Boris Johnson is that he reveals some rabbit out of the hat at about 11:45, just before Prime Minister's questions. Maybe he's got a recording, for example, of Boris Johnson saying something untoward. I mean, wouldn't be unheard of, would it? I mean, that would be completely incendiary.
That's right, because when we discussed a couple of weeks ago the allegation that Boris had said something about let the bodies pile high, it was said that, at the moment, that's a rumour, disputed, denied. But if there is actually an audio recording of anything like that, then that becomes less about Dominic Cummings and his credibility and just puts all the pressure on
Boris
Prime
Johnson
Minister.
in Parliament at Prime Minister's questions denied he said it. He flatly denied he said it. Now, look, he's a proven liar. He's got a long track record of lying, but it's always more serious if you lie in the House of Commons, because the Speaker could theoretically call you to demand that you apologise, and that would be utterly humiliating for a Prime
let's remember,
Minister.
disgruntled employees sometimes do record things because they might think, oh, this might be useful a bit later. I don't know whether he's got a recording, but let's not rule it out.
In one sense, it's almost useful for the government, because this is all distracted from the other big political story, which is, first we had only essential travel to 8 areas. The announcement coming out on Friday, the government not telling anybody about it. Therese Coffey, the Secretary of State on the programme yesterday, having a lot of difficulty answering questions about it. Should we have a quick listen to what she had to say?
Let's do that.
What is the official advice about half-term? Are they not allowed to travel to see family and friends elsewhere in England? Are they not allowed to travel abroad?
I think the government is encouraging people who are living in identified communities at high risk about whether any travel that could spread the virus is really for them to consider carefully about whether that travel is necessary.
So back to this family in Bolton who's booked a trip to Portugal for half-term. What are you saying? That I should travel because I consider it common sense and much needed, or that I should stay at home?
I'm not going to give individual travel guidance on hypothetical situations to people
you've got a whole
in
list,
different parts of the country.
Travel guidance.
The guidance
You've got
is very
green
clear,
list,
Susanna,
amber list and red
that
list.
people need to consider whether it really is essential.
The guidance was very clear, and now they've withdrawn it.
Yeah, well, they come up with another version, haven't they? But it's a complete mess, total confusion, because the message and the clarity is what is important. And she couldn't answer that. Downing Street couldn't answer that yesterday. So what do people do? The government is trying to switch onto personal responsibility. It's all about you now, obeying the rules. Well, what are the rules? What am I supposed to do? And again, this might have been forgivable at the beginning of the pandemic last year, but it is totally unforgivable now at this point. And there are local lockdowns. They're light lockdowns, but they're local lockdowns. But the government is frightened of describing it as that. I think it's just got to be honest and straight, and it's not been that at all.
Well, talking about clarifying, the Vaccines Minister, Nadhim Zahawi, said people should use their common sense. Well, either people follow their common sense or they follow the rules. I mean, sometimes they're not the same thing. What we're asking is those people in affected areas to be cautious, to be careful. So on visiting family, meet outdoors rather than inside where possible. Meet 2 metres apart from people you don't live with unless you formed a support bubble. Yes, people can visit family in half-term if they follow social distancing. And then he added, avoid travelling in and out of the affected areas, as the Prime Minister said on the 14th, unless it is essential. For example, for work purposes.
Kevin is right here, that the messaging is so important. And if you have effectively a local lockdown or there's a breakout locally, the key thing is to get all of the messages to the directors of public health, the local council leaders, the local MPs. None of them were informed about this. That's the mistake. Now, this is not rocket science. This is what government communications people are paid lots of money to do. I don't understand why it's happened yet again.
I wonder whether it's sort of soft messaging, Kevin, in that they don't want to give the bad news that there's a local lockdown, but they think that if they just sort of nudge people, enough people will change their behaviour to have an impact on transmission.
Yeah, even that soft messaging there, they forgot to tell local people. They forgot to tell the public health official, the local authority, the MPs. They didn't contact the local radio station and newspapers to get it on TV. There was no minister standing up in that £2.3 million briefing room saying, look, this is what we need to do. You know, the Prime Minister wants the whole country to come out of England, to come out of lockdown at the same time. The fact is, you're going to have outbreaks in some areas where you will need specific controls. There's a big dispute whether or not they work, but I can see you will try and impose those controls.
And this affects individuals. A friend of mine in Leicester's mother went into hospital quite seriously yesterday, was thinking couldn't go and see her because of the misunderstanding about these rules. Now, that has been cleared up now. But this is real people's lives that we're talking about.
And also, sorry, Dr. I was just going to say, it was a bit like the holiday guidance. It sort of transfers a sense of guilt to people. It's not... Common sense would say, of course, your friend can visit their mother. But if you're being told only for essential, only for work, it just makes everything difficult, doesn't it? Sorry, Dr.
Certainly do need clarity. If you've got a hotspot there, you have to ask, why is there a hotspot in that particular area? Is there anything about the geographical area? No, there isn't. Is there anything about the type of virus that's circulating? No, there isn't. It's about the failure to adopt sensible precautions and to behave in a way that it restricts the spread of the variant. So there does need to be clarity, and it's really important that there's clarity. If you say you follow common sense, but there are no rules, you're going to get the same problem. And I think that's a worry.
The good news for the government and for all of us, really, though, is that the vaccine rollout continues apace.
Fabulous.
And now, was it everybody over the age of 30 is being invited
That's right,
to get
Bill.
vaccinated?
People aged 30 and 31 will be getting their offers of vaccination from this Wednesday. So that's really encouraging. It's already happening in Wales. People over 25. It's already happening in Northern Ireland and in Scotland very soon as well. So fantastic. 60 million doses and plus and rising. And it's all good news.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but people will notice this morning this very sad story about the granddad, who was the first man in the world to receive an approved COVID vaccine. We featured his story on the programme, 81 years old, but William Shakespeare, appropriately named, of course, and I'm sure he was chosen partly maybe for that reason, he has, unfortunately, and we send our condolences to his family, passed away. He suffered from a stroke. Now, this comes out at the same time that doctors are urged to watch for signs of stroke following vaccination. So, Dr. Hillary, people will be asking themselves,
Sure.
Is there a connection in this case?
Strokes are very common anyway. They're one of the commonest causes of disability and death in this country, and they happen in children as well as people aged 81 and plus. As far as William Shakespeare's friend is concerned, this was an unrelated event. He was on the frailty list anyway when he was the second man in the world to be given the vaccine. So it wasn't related in his case, and for him, the vaccine was certainly not much ado about nothing. He absolutely celebrated the moment that he had the vaccine and was very keen to tell the world how important it was. As regards the other strokes that we've seen, strokes happen anyway in all age groups. And the risk of a thrombotic episode after vaccine is thought to be somewhere in the region of 1 in 100,000. And it's much more common in people who get COVID-19 infection itself. So it still means vaccination is extremely important and
One other
relatively very safe.
health-related item of concern, the sad news again, is that Nadia Whittome, the youngest MP, at the age of 24, Labour MP for Nottingham East, is having to take time off because of PTSD and all the stress that she's been suffering from being a member of the House of Commons.
I know post-traumatic stress disorder. I think there's a huge burden on anybody who becomes an MP. You've campaigned and gone through a lot, and then there's a lot of pressure on you. And I think when you're particularly young, then it's going to be far greater. I wish her a very speedy recovery. She's an incredibly engaging person. And I think she's taken this decision, said it was very hard because being an MP is the honour of her life, serving her constituents in Nottingham. But you just think it's, look, good on you, speaking out, publicly recognising there is a problem, and you'll encourage
she hasn't
others.
hidden it away. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, she will encourage others. Yeah.
People are much more open, Ian, aren't they, about the stresses and strains and the actual physical toll. It feels like a kind of physical thing now, mental health.
I mean, I was chairing a seminar yesterday on the whole levelling up agenda, and it was supposed to be all around health. And the majority of the time we talked about mental health, which we wouldn't have done 10 years ago, would we? And you have all sorts of well-known people, whether it's politicians, celebrities, sports stars, coming out and saying, yeah, I suffer from this too. You may think I'm a really successful person, but I have this issue just like a lot of you do too.
Ian, lovely to see you today. And Kevin, as always,
you.
thanks very much indeed. Dr. Hillary, thanks very much. Well, we're all in need of a little bit of relaxation.
We are.
And Bill has recommended this is his favourite way to bliss out. Well, it's beautiful sound, and it's being produced by Tibetan singing bowls, and with them, therapist Andrea Lowry. Andrea, Bill listens to this lovely sound as a sort of therapy. What is it about it which is so soothing?
Well, actually, it's the sound itself. It's the vibration. I think Bill said it well yesterday when he said that it somehow penetrates and gets right into your soul. And that's exactly what the vibrations do, and it's what they've done for thousands of years.
We could feel the blood pressure generally in the studio plummeting. It was absolutely wonderful. How long did it take you to learn how to well, you don't really play the bowls specifically. Is there a particular term for it?
Well, it is a term which is just playing. You're playing the bowls. But this is something that's been going on for a very, very long time. And sound and therapy itself as a healing instrument has been here as long as humans have.
Well, I wonder whether the Prime Minister might need a bit of Tibetan singing bowl soothing this morning, because at 9:30, of course, Dominic Cummings appears before the Select Committee to divulge everything that he wants to divulge in a criticism of how the Prime Minister acted over the lockdowns. Andrea, thank you very much indeed.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
And I have another wonderful story for you. This is the story of 21-year-old Morgan Evans. Now, Morgan was at the Manchester Arena when 22 people were killed, of course, in that absolutely dreadful bombing at the Ariana Grande concert on the 22nd of May, 2017. So you can imagine that for everyone involved, that anniversary, which happened at the weekend, is a really, really difficult time. Now, Morgan was not injured, but she was inside the arena. And her boyfriend, James, knows how difficult that anniversary is. They've been friends for 6 years. Morgan is a student nurse. They've been together for a year after they moved in together at the beginning of the lockdown. So in order to lift Morgan's spirits, James organised a party this weekend. And at the party, this happened.
Specifically for this day, to give her something to keep her occupied and cheer her up, and give us something to celebrate. Just, everybody, while you're here, there is actually one question that I've got to ask. So, Morgan, if you just quickly turn around. Will you marry me?
I think someone even said yes for her, didn't they? Because in a moment like that, I expect everyone's like, say yes, say yes.
She did say yes in the end.
She said yes. They haven't set a date
really
yet, but it just changes the day, doesn't it, for Morgan, from something which has very difficult memories to something which is incredibly positive. So congratulations to James and to Morgan. What an absolutely lovely moment.
Yeah. And if they want to continue the celebrations, they could join the competition.
They could.
Couldn't they? Your chance to win a Range Rover and £50,000.
That would be a nice honeymoon.
Has the details.
Good morning from the Harbour Hotel here in Padstow in Cornwall. Now that we're allowed to travel, I've got a prize that can see you travelling around in style. It's a brand new Range Rover Evoque. And talking of summer days, we're also throwing in Ray-Ban sunglasses and some Louis Vuitton luggage. And if you're still thinking about entering, well, listen, £50,000 is also included in the prize. That's right, £50,000 in tax-free cash. So that's the brand new Range Rover, 50 grand and the boot in the loot, or should that be the loot in the boot? It can all be yours, and here's how. For your chance to win the car, the cash and the loot in the boot, go to the website. Entries cost £2. Text WIN to 65557. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can call 09068 78557. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and phone number to BK21, PO Box 7558, Derby, DE1 0NQ. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 2 p.m. on Friday the 11th of June. Good luck.
We predict showers. Warm showers. Juicy. Proud sponsors of Good Morning Britain National Weather. Boxed boilers.
Hello, good morning from RHS Garden, Wizzy, where it is a lovely spring morning. It certainly has been quite chilly, and the cold weather has meant there's been significant damage to Wisteria Walkway. This should be in full bloom at the moment, but those cold, frosty nights that we've seen through the spring has damaged it. It's irreplaceable for this year, but it will make a comeback this year, and there's still plenty more to see here at the Gardens if you are going to be coming here in the next few days. Lovely weather expected over the next few days as well. We're talking about temperatures increasing up to 23 degrees Celsius by the time we get to Sunday. So something for all of us to look forward to with high pressure moving in. However, today is going to be a little more changeable. Like yesterday, showers across northern areas will come as far south as, say, Manchester. But beyond this, it's going to be largely dry with some decent sunshine as we head through into the afternoon. Temperatures starting to respond, so we're looking at a daytime high of 19 degrees Celsius this afternoon. As we head into this evening, the showery activity will tend to die down. Another cold night certainly on the cards, but that bit warmer as we head into tomorrow. Largely dry conditions with a good amount of sunshine. That's your forecast.
For the weather in detail where you are, go to itv.com/weather.
Wednesday, 26th of May, 2021. Live from Television Centre in London, this is Good Morning Britain with Susanna Reid and Bill Turnbull.
Good morning, Britain. It is 7 o'clock.
Oh, you've got us on time for your final day this week. Will you come back, Bill?
If we can keep the time, yes.
Brilliant. Oh, and at 7:01, our main news this morning. Boris Johnson's former advisor, Dominic Cummings, is expected to give damning testimony today on the government's handling of coronavirus when he appears before MPs.
It's reported he'll accuse the Prime Minister of saying that COVID was only killing 80-year-olds when he was deciding whether to delay last autumn's lockdown.
Our correspondent, Richard Gaisford, is in Downing Street. Richard, they must be bracing themselves for what Dominic Cummings is going to reveal.
I'm sure they are. And when he walked out of the door here back in November for the last time, he was carrying that big box. We're now wondering whether it was full of evidence to give to MPs today. Over the last few days, Susanna, he's been outlining his case, his side of the COVID story in 64 tweets, including the fact that he says the government had no serious plan to protect those in social care from COVID. Mr. Cummings' own view on life has been laid out in these tweets. Certainly his credibility has been tested quite sorely over his own breaking of lockdown rules. MPs are going to want more than just anecdotal evidence, really, of what might have been happening in the back rooms here at Downing Street. They want some hard, fast facts on what shaped policy and what might or might not have cost lives. A year ago in the Downing Street Rose Garden, relations with his boss matched the weather, despite the furore over that trip to Barnard Castle.
I think that's very, very plausible that that eyesight can be a problem associated with coronavirus.
If the Prime Minister thinks that I should stop, then that's not for me to decide. It's up to him to decide.
Since then, it's all exploded amid claims of a behind-the-scenes power struggle involving Boris Johnson's fiancée, Carrie Simons. Today's appearance before MPs promises to be box office stuff. The Prime Minister's once most senior and trusted advisor has plenty to say. Amongst Dominic Cummings' cache of claims, there was no plan for lockdown in March last year. The Prime Minister delayed last autumn's lockdown after allegedly saying COVID's only killing 80-year-olds. The government was initially pursuing a policy of herd immunity, which it denies. And the Prime Minister, like Donald Trump, referred to coronavirus as Kung Flu. But to all these allegations, smack of a man seeking revenge after his unceremonious exit from Downing Street late last year.
I think it will be very difficult for the man that is known to the public as going to Barnard Castle driving in a car because he thought it was a good idea to do that as an eye test. There's going to be a fundamental credibility issue there.
You're supposed to be more than 2 metres apart.
Dominic Cummings has already released a trailer for today's appearance, posting a series of tweets lambasting the government in the early days of the pandemic. It could prove to be excruciating viewing, not least for the Prime Minister himself. But is the man who once planned Boris Johnson's path to victory now plotting his downfall, or selflessly helping the country learn from one of the worst disasters in decades? Richard Gaisford, Good Morning Britain.
In the rest of the news this morning, after 24 hours of confusion, the government has updated its advice for people in 8 areas worst hit by the Indian COVID variant. They're now being asked to minimise rather than avoid travel. Meanwhile, a hospital in Bolton has urged people to attend A&E only if absolutely necessary after a fresh surge in COVID cases there. Kate Hemingway is at the Royal Bolton Hospital. And Kate, this Indian variant clearly putting the NHS there under pressure.
Yes, morning, Ranveer. The Royal Bolton Hospital has recorded one of its busiest days ever yesterday, and it says it now has 41 patients with coronavirus that it's being treated, and 8 of those are in intensive care. It comes as Bolton has topped the list of places in England for COVID cases now, and the spread of it largely due to what's being called and referred to as the Indian variant. That, of course, has led to surge jabs and surge testing in the town. And we've seen over the last couple of weeks hundreds of people, in fact thousands, queuing outside vaccination centres to get those jabs. We know the Indian variant is now up in new figures out today in 121 local authority areas. And it comes as over 30-year-olds are going to be offered the vaccine from today for the first time. Millions of them expected to receive text messages telling them that they can now get their jabs. And it also comes as the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has praised the phenomenal pace of the vaccination programme.
Kate, thank you. The government has announced a £400 million boost for rail services in the north of England and the Midlands, designed to make them faster, greener and more reliable. The majority of money will be invested in the Trans-Pennine route between Manchester, Leeds and York. Nick Dixon is on a Manchester-bound train. Good morning to you, Nick. What's the money going to be spent on?
Morning to you, Ranveer. Well, just going through a tunnel at the moment on our way to Manchester, but the majority of that funding, about £400 million, really is going to be spent on infrastructure, particularly the tracks and part of the network up north. The idea really is to improve connectivity and reliability, but also start using more environmentally friendly trains as well. Now, as I say, the vast majority of that £400 million funding, about 317, will be spent up north on the Trans-Pennine routes, particularly between Leeds, Manchester and York, the busiest section of the network up here, with more than 100 trains passing through each day. They're also looking to deliver electrification on parts of that network as well, to have faster trains and cut down on delays. But as well as these improvements and upgrades, they will be building new stations in parts of the country, in the southwest, in Exeter and Leeds, and also working to boost the economy by improving freight links between the south and the Midlands as well.
Nick, we were just noticing here in the studio that we almost don't comment on the fact that at 7:07 on a weekday morning, that train, or the carriage you're in, is completely empty. I mean, is the train busy at all?
Not really, to be honest. I do quite a lot of broadcasts on the trains, and over the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks, I have noticed that even by 8 o'clock, the trains aren't particularly busy, and I know all the train companies are desperate to encourage people back on board, but no, they really are very quiet. And as you say, at this time, nearly 7:10, you'd expect it to be much, much busier. This is going into Manchester, this train as well.
Yes, I'm sure there will be an uptake, but we've got Grant Shapps on the programme, haven't we, later? Just this idea that with home working and so on now becoming a big part of what we do in our lives, in lots of jobs, the idea that you now spend all this money on trains when I don't know, you just wonder, are they actually going to have the same amount of commuters who want to spend the money on travelling and all of that?
We've all got home offices. Well, I mean, we haven't. We're still coming.
No, but we could have if we needed to, and that's
true. Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't even need to go in. You don't need to go in for meetings, but you don't actually need to go in for a full work day.
Yes,
either.
and when people, I think, after lockdown, some people do feel like they've got a bit more money because actually they haven't spent those thousands of pounds on trains. Anyway, interesting stuff this morning. Other news: new figures suggest severe staff shortages will mean a third of pubs and restaurants will not be able to reopen next month when lockdown restrictions are due to come to an end. Lorna Shaddock is at a restaurant in Devon. What's the reason for so many vacancies, Lorna?
Well, Ranveer, we're all really keen, aren't we, to get back to places like this after lockdown, enjoy our indoor dining. But it seems there is much less of an appetite among restaurant and bar staff to come back to work after the pandemic. Many of them who lived abroad have gone back home during lockdown and haven't returned. And others have simply found different jobs and decided not to go back into the hospitality industry. And that means that certain restaurants, like the one here in Devon, are bringing in quite unusual incentive schemes. Jamie, you're the owner here. What are you doing to try and get people back to work here?
OK, so what we're offering is a £1,000 bonus for senior members of staff that stay from now till the end of the summer to try and, give people that incentive to come, or guests at £500 in food vouchers if they can help recommend somebody.
Wow. So why aren't people coming back to work?
I think the market's just flooded. There's so many places offering really loads of money, and little businesses like me can't keep up with what the bigger boys can pay. And obviously, it would have helped, I think, if the government would have kept the job retention scheme in place, so it would have given people a better incentive.
Yeah, well, certainly the government, I think, would say they have put in quite a few other schemes, including the Restart grants. There's been VAT rate deferral and recovery loan schemes, some of which I know you have been able to take advantage of. But certainly, if you do want to come out soon and have your three-course meal, there may not be anybody to serve it to you.
All right, Lorna, thank you so much. 7:10, still ahead on Good Morning Britain. One of Hollywood's most iconic scenes. Marilyn Monroe standing over a subway grate in the 7-Year Itch. But a new statue in tribute has been slammed as misogynistic and promoting upskirting.
So, is this famous film moment offensive and outdated? We'll be debating that live in the next hour and with our very own Marilyn Monroe here in the studio.
First, let's get the news, travel and weather where you are. See you in a moment.
Bit drafty, isn't it? Okay.
"13 still to come. In his own words, he got Brexit done and then made America great again. Nigel Farage joins us next to tell us how he feels cancel culture hoaxers are trying to silence him as he tours the States.
You're watching Good Morning Britain on ITV. Big political story this morning. Former chief advisor to the Prime Minister, Dominic Cummings, is expected to provide damning testimony on the government's handling of coronavirus when he appears before MPs.
Well, former UKIP and Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage once described Dominic Cummings as a horrible, nasty little man. So what would he make of this morning? Mr. Farage joins us now from Phoenix, Arizona. Good morning to you. Will you be trying to watch this with interest?
Oh, I will. I mean, it's one of the most extraordinary things that's happened in a very long time. Dominic Cummings is a very vengeful person and no doubt will try and get his own back on Boris Johnson. I suspect, though, that Matt Hancock will come in for even more abuse. The question is, he's already put out dozens of tweets about what he intends to say. Does he have another rabbit he's going to put out of the hat? And that's what everyone is waiting for.
You call him vengeful, but he was right there at the heart of government when all of these decisions were made. And it's absolutely critically important we get that story. Do you think that what he says is going to damage the government, or do you think he has already been undermined?
Well, I think he may well damage the government in the sense that there's no question they were going for a herd immunity programme to begin with that would have killed many hundreds of thousands of people, given that it was a new virus. We'd no idea how to deal with it. And then when they changed the policy, they still kept the flights open. 18 million people came into the UK in the first half of last year without a single person being tested or asked to quarantine in any way. So he's going to come out with all this stuff, but there's nothing new in that. You know, we've heard all that before. We know all of that. And Boris Johnson has half apologised for it already. The question is, does he have anything new? That's the part we're all waiting for.
You're in Arizona as part of a US speaking tour. And some questions as to how successfully it's going. How many people are actually turning up to your events?
So I've just finished an event here in Phoenix. There were well over 1,000 people there. Really uproarious mood. And of course, Brexit, the Trump phenomenon, these are all part of the same thing. We're fighting common enemies. And yet what you get are these ridiculous sort of cancel culture mobs putting out lies on Twitter that no one's turning up and all the rest of it. I've been touring now for 5 weeks. It's been very successful, big audiences every single night, and don't believe a word of it.
It was reported the first date of your tour was reported to have attracted just 21 people, 6 of whom were members of your own team. Is that not true?
I know, and I can show you the photographs from that night. That was in Pittsburgh, and there were about 250 there. All right, not as many as 1,000 tonight, but still a very decent, respectable crowd. But this is the world we live in. The left just make up fake news the entire time, such is their loathing and hatred of those of us that believe in national democracy.
Let's talk about Donald Trump, because the way you're speaking, Nigel Farage, you've clearly learned some lessons from him. How is he doing at the moment? Because with that talk of Twitter, it's been very quiet from Donald Trump over the last few weeks and months.
You're right. I mean, it's quite extraordinary that a man who had 88 million Twitter followers and was president of the biggest country in the world, most powerful country in the world for 4 years, has been banned from Twitter. Quite outrageous. He is going back on the road. I've been twice to Mar-a-Lago since I've been here. I've spent a fair bit of time with him. He's on good form. He's going back on the road. The rallies will start again in June, and he will get his message out. Of that, I've got no doubt.
Do you seriously think he'll run in 2024?
I think he's weighing it up very, very closely. I mean, he's 74. He's in, very good health, actually. He'd lost a lot of weight when I saw him, playing lots of golf, very determined, mentally, ready to fight again. But, between 74 and 78, things can, of course, go wrong. I would just say this. The Republican Party, in my view, hasn't got anybody else with his courage or his charisma. I know his style occasionally puts some people off, but he does have courage and charisma. And unless somebody remarkable appears in the Republican Party, I think there's a very good chance that he goes again.
Yeah. Has he accepted yet that he lost the election?
Well, here's the interesting thing. 60% of Republican voters, that's 1 in 3 people who voted in the American elections, doubt the integrity of the election result. And the reason for that,
isn't it?
Well, I tell you what's not fake news. Tony Blair introduced postal voting in 2001, which has led to a massive increase in voter fraud in the United Kingdom, dozens of people going to prison. America last year, for the first time ever, experimented with mass postal voting. And maybe we should all learn a lesson from France. They've stopped it. They realise it's always unreliable.
Okay, so you're still putting out the idea that the election was stolen?
No, I've never said that. Not once. I've never, ever said that once. What I've said is that large-scale mass postal voting is always open to intimidation, ballot harvesting and abuse. And indeed, I have fought court cases on this in the United Kingdom. I've lost them because knowing something has happened and proving it is very, very different. Postal voting completely ruins the concept of election day. There is an argument for those that are elderly or infirm or working abroad. They should get a postal vote. That would be 2 or 3% of the vote. As it is, we get an election.
Somebody who lost a huge number of court cases or legal actions over it, of course, was Donald Trump. I mean, this is a ridiculous situation where we're still arguing about the outcome of the presidential election.
Well, as I say, 1 in 3 American voters doubt the election integrity. There is right here now in Maricopa County, the biggest county in Phoenix, a big audit going on. I don't know what that's going to produce. I suspect what it will do is make Americans further doubt the integrity of the result. But the important thing, I think, for the Republicans is not to look backwards, it's to look forwards and make sure that mass mail-out voting never, ever happens again.
OK, I just want to ask a final question. And this is, I don't tend to believe conspiracy theories. But there's an interesting change in tone on the origins of COVID and whether it actually was something that was a mistake that originated in the lab. We know that Dr. Fauci has started sort of hinting at a change in tone on this. What do you make of that? And of course, Donald Trump called it Kung Flu, blamed China. for it. What do you make of what's being now reported about where the virus might have come from?
What we know for certain is that the Chinese covered up the outbreak of this virus, yet allowed their citizens to fly all over the world, taking it with them. The extraordinary thing is, the World Health Organization view that it came from one of the wet markets in Wuhan is something many of us have been skeptical about. And yet, anybody that said this probably came from the Wuhan lab would find themselves suspended from Twitter, banned from Facebook, and mainstream media called it a conspiracy theory. Now it begins to look like it was true. Personally, I think it's very unlikely that this did not come out of that lab. I'm pretty certain that it did. And this is going to reflect, when this truth comes out, very badly on mainstream media and very badly on social media too.
Well, there's plenty that reflects badly on social media. Nigel Farage, thanks very much indeed for joining us this morning.
25 minutes past 7. Should a double jab be your key to freedom? Because about a third of us in the UK now have 2 injections. Is it time to allow these people to exit lockdown early? We'll be debating that next.
You're watching Good Morning Britain on ITV.